Okay, good morning Y11. Our second lesson of the day focuses on the Weimar Constitution. So the word constitution basically means a set of laws which say how the country has to run. So what I would like you to first do is just pause the video and write out the title and the date in your exercise book. When you have done that, have a look at the image on the right and pause the video and think as to how does this link to what we studied last lesson. To recap, by 1918 Germany lay in ruins. The people were tired and angry with the emperor and the government. The German Revolution occurred throughout these months, where Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated, which basically means he gave up his throne and he fled the country. So now leaderless, the German people looked to the government for support. The party with the biggest support was the Social Democratic Party, the SPD. In January 1919, the democracy was officially named the Weimar Republic, and it is this democracy, I suppose, is which we study for the remainder of this unit. And what governed the Weimar Republic was the Weimar Constitution. So can you remember what the word constitution means again? Rewind the video to help you remember. This change was huge for Germany. They no longer had an emperor, which they had had for centuries. And they lived in a democratic society where the people could vote for their change. So your first task today is to write down in your exercise book a number of features that you would expect to see in the perfect democracy. So try and write down 5 things. A hint, think of how a country you know is run, i.e. the UK. And one thing I would expect to see in a perfect democracy is free speech, where there is no censorship of the newspaper. So what I would like you to do is please pause the video and write down 5 things that you would expect to see in the perfect democracy. Democracies are for the most part focused around equality and giving equal rights to all people. So the Weimar Constitution tried just this. And there were 4 layers to the Weimar Constitution which were all interlinked. First, you had the president, who was the head of state, and he chose the chancellor. And the president could also dissolve parliament as well as call elections, but he played no part in the everyday politics of the country. However, crucially, he was elected by the people. So the people elected the president, who chose the chancellor. Then there was the Chancellor, who was the head of the government, and this position similar to the Prime Minister. He could choose the ministers who made up the cabinet, and he basically oversaw the running of the country. He was also chosen by the president, so the president chose the Chancellor. Working alongside the Chancellor was the cabinet, who were the government ministers who helped run the country. In Germany at this time, there were 2 parliaments, the Reichsrat and the Reichstag. The Reichstag, this one, was the more important of the 2 and controlled the taxes. It was elected by the people every 4 years for elections. So these are kind of similar to the House of Commons and House of Lords, but the Reichstag is the more important of the 2. And finally, you had the electorate. So these were all men and women over the age of 20 who were given the right to vote. What I would like you to now do is just pause the video and have a reread of this information. After this, I would like you to create a diagram of how the government worked. So for example, I would have president here, the electorate down here, but a line connecting the 2. As the electorates choose the president. I would then have a line going down for Chancellor because the President chooses the Chancellor. Pause the video and have a go. The two important positions of the Weimar Republic were the President, here, and the Chancellor, and they play a crucial role moving forward, so it's important you understand them and their responsibilities. So at this time, the President was Friedrich Ebert. Okay, so he was the person who basically created the Weimar Republic. His role, as you can read, was to be elected directly by the people every 7 years. He would take no part in the day-to-day running of the country, and he could choose the Chancellor, and he could dismiss the Chancellor. He could also dissolve and dismiss Parliament and call new elections. He was the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, which he could use to suppress revolts, and finally he had the power of Article 48, which meant that he could rule by emergency decree if public order broke down. So this is important. If public order broke down, he could rule by emergency decree. Secondly, we have the Chancellor, Philipp Schneidmann. So he was appointed by the President, and his position was often the leader of the biggest party with the most seats in Parliament in the Reichstag. Okay, so he would choose ministers to help him run the country, and he could pass laws, but he needed the support of the majority, similar to the UK. So at this stage, does it sound like the Weimar Republic is a good democracy? Why? Pause the video, have a think about what you wrote for the perfect democracy. Equality, everyone has the right to kind of participate. Does the Weimar Republic sound like a good democracy? Pause the video now. What we come on to now is this table. And this table actually demonstrates how it was not so clear-cut. What I would like you to do, similar to the last table we encountered, is just number these boxes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I would like you to read through these boxes and identify whether they were strengths of the Weimar Republic or they were weaknesses to the Weimar Republic. For example, the voting age was reduced to 20 and women were able to vote as well as men. I would say this is a strength of the Weimar Republic, as it gave more people. It was, first of all, was more equal. Women were allowed to vote, but also it was reduced to the age of 20, so more people were able to vote. I'd say this is one of its strengths. So pause the video now, have a read through and identify the strengths and weaknesses. So to me, this exercise shows that although on paper the Weimar Republic sounds like a fantastic democracy where everyone was involved and the power rested on the people, as the people chose the president and the president chose the chancellor and the chancellor chose the ministers. In reality, all these different parties and opinions meant that there was often a lack of leadership and a lack of clear policies. But I want you to also make up your mind. So as number 4 says, overall, how strong was the Constitution? I would like you to please draw a line in your book like this. And on one side have strength. How strong was the Constitution? On one side have very weak and the other side have very strong. And I would like you to place where you think the Constitution fits. Once you have done that, I would like you to explain why you have said that. So pause the video now and have a go at completing this task. Once done, have a think as to who you think was pleased with the Constitution and who might not have been. Who would be pleased with this Constitution and who would be more frustrated? When you have done this, the lesson is finished. But before we end, I want you to try and recreate the diagram of the Weimar Constitution. Can you remember it without looking? Also, which parliament was stronger? Which parliament was more important? Can you remember how to spell it? If not, have a rewind to help you remember. This finishes and concludes our final lesson of today. Thank you.